All right. Good afternoon.
Good
Welcome to
afternoon.
the Immigration Podcast. My name is Rob Ratliff. I'm an immigration attorney in Cleveland, Ohio, and with me today is
Susan Hill. I'm an immigration attorney in the South Carolina and Charlotte, North Carolina area, and I'm at Hiller Law Group.
Susan. This is our fifth podcast.
Yes, it is.
Like a whole hand. We got to start counting on our other hand now. So we were just talking before we hit the record button about the recent USCIS posts, the continuous vetting for everything. Have you seen anything? Have you seen anything new coming along those paths?
Well, I haven't had an interview yet scheduled, but I have read what USCIS has posted about. They're going to be vetting for anti-americanism, and I'm not really quite sure what they mean by that. Rob, I'm really concerned because there's nothing in the Immigration and Nationality Act. This hasn't been, power conferred on USCIS by Congress to look for anti-Americanism, except with regard to certain communism and Nazis. And yet they didn't screen the South Africans for Nazi affiliation coming in. And my understanding is some of them may have Nazi affiliation. So those are the only ones that Congress has put in place. And we're supposed to be a country of freedom of speech. So what are your thoughts on it? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's and it's even so much broader. I mean, this whole reconsideration of and re-review of every case every time raises so many other issues as well. But with respect to the anti-Americanism, I mean, that's just such a fluid concept. What's anti-American today versus what's anti-American tomorrow. It reeks of vagueness from a political standpoint. How are you to know what is or is not anti-American? But I almost don't think that they care. They're going to make it as uncomfortable as possible for anybody that wants to come here, and as uncomfortable as possible for anybody that is here. And they just hope that some people will leave on their own. And every person that does just give up and leave on their own, it's a win.
Yeah, or they only want people who are non-political or not engaged in the world and have their own opinions, because one of the things they're screening for is anti-Semitism. But what is anti-Semitic to somebody who is, practice Judaism? Is it necessarily anti-Semitism to them? But to our administration, for some reason, it is. Like, you can be against the Zionist teachings, which are anti-Christian, if you read the Talmud, I think Talmud. But it's not anti-Semitic to actually Semites that live in the area and grew up in the area of Palestine and or Israel and derive themselves from the lands there. The Judaism that's non-Zionist does not believe that's anti-Semitic. So whose definition are we going by?
Well, and I find it hard to believe that the administration would be that short-sighted on this, because the next administration very well could determine that it's un-American to be anti-trans, or it's un-American to be homophobic, or it's un-American to be virtually anything. And because of the authority that the Attorney General has and the Secretary of Homeland Security has in some of these discretionary analysis issues, I find it hard to believe that that an administration is that short-sighted to put this anti-Americanism litmus test on immigration.
Well, so why do you think they're doing it?
I wish I understood it, but I think it's just part of a broader policy to try to make living and staying in the United States as uncomfortable as possible, trying to force out as many people as possible. The thing that concerns me about this whole continuous vetting thing, even maybe as much as the um, the vagueness of what is anti-American, is the number of clients I've had over the years and currently have, who maybe one spouse has some sort of status, the other spouse maybe not quite so much, or just the different statuses within a family group. And so if it's time to renew your green card, or you're applying for citizenship, or you're renewing your work authorization, whatever it is, a lot of those forms have who else lives with you, what's your family, are you married, are you not married, are you suddenly throwing some family member, child, spouse, parent under the bus, immigration speaking, because now they're doing this continuous vetting and they're looking for all these violations. And I know many married couples where one has status, the other maybe it's a little bit more questionable. What does it mean to them for this continuous vetting? And that's the thing I'm counseling my clients on now. When somebody calls me and says, "Hey, my 10-year green card's coming up, I need to renew it." Are you still married to that guy? So here's what might happen, and you have to tell your clients that, because you don't know if DHS comes knocking on the door.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know, again, going back to anti-American, like, is it there's cases that are going to go up on same-sex marriage? And is it anti-American to believe in, you can marry who you love as long as it's not a child? So is it anti-American to be against homosexuality and two gay couples getting married? Or is it anti-American to believe they can't get married? Is it it seems more like a political test, what does the political party that's in power, if we're going to go down that road, believe is like you were saying, is anti-American? Is it anti-American to believe in interracial marriages? Because that's going to be something they're going to go after next, apparently, in Project 2025. So is it anti-American to believe immigrants have a right to be in the country?
Yeah. Well, and it opens the door for them, and we've talked about it in the past, like in the Solomon case I'm involved in right now. But we've talked about it, and we've talked about it in the past. It opens the door for them to revoke any kind of status, label you a danger to society, label you, and seek mandatory detention. It allows them to seek mandatory detention for things that they now claim are fraud. You didn't disclose your anti-American views previously, so that's fraud, and now you're subject to mandatory detention. Maybe I just see so many vague things in the law that I don't know how that it stands up to a constitutional review. But by the time it gets there, 2-3 years from now, how many people have just voluntarily left? Because if you're going to be detained for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and they start.
How do you afford an attorney when you're locked up too, because you're not working? So, like you said, I think this is whether they win in the long run doesn't matter. Maybe to them, maybe in the short term, it's a deterrent factor for people to not get into status, which is what we should want. We should want people to comply with the law and get into compliance. And instead, kind of as a deterrent factor, because they're not sure if they go, what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, in Charlotte recently, now this person did have a removal order, but they were going in for an I-130 interview, and they have an officer stationed now. Actually, this is in Raleigh. They have an officer, immigration officer stationed now. When I say that, I mean an enforcement removal operations officer, deportation officer, in the actual USCIS building in Raleigh. And they picked this person up after the I-130 interview. Yes, they have a removal.
After the interview.
Yes, and they do have a removal order. However, they were going to apply for an I-212 and an I-601A. So they were doing everything they could to get in compliance with the laws, and they would have to have left. But they need the I-130 approved first before they can go on to the I-601A. Unfortunately, as you know, all these steps are separate, and until you can get one step done, which may take years, you can't move on to the next step.
Yeah. And there's not been any kind of clear indication of who or what they're actually looking for in these things. And I mean, and so I think that is just, again, part of engendering fear and creating a perception of chaos. And it could be me, it could be anybody, that in all these interview situations, and it almost forces people to make an error or to make a mistake or to not show up in an interview because they're just terrified.
And if they're asked questions about religion, they might not feel comfortable answering them now. Instead of basically saying, okay, I'm a Hindu and I believe in peace and this is what I believe in, they may be afraid to talk about their own religion or any religion because is it anti-Semitic? And again, what bothers me too, I do want to bring this up, is that the one example that USCIS is using is anti-Semitic. They're not even using anti-Christian, anti-Muslim, anti-Hindu, anti-Sikh, anti-Buddhist. They're not using other, majority religions in the world. They're literally saying anti-Semitic. And most of these people come from countries predominantly of Christian, Muslim, Islam, Hindu, maybe no religion, Buddhist, other, peaceful, very peaceful thinking religions, but not, the majority of them aren't coming from Israel. We saw a lot of Russian Jews back in the 1990s coming and claiming asylum, but you don't see many of those religious claims anymore. So when you ask religious questions, if they talk about their own religion, is that anti-Semitic? And how is that anti-American? I don't see anything in the immigration laws that says that we have to be pro other religions as long as we're not persecuting other people for their religious beliefs.
Yeah, and it's some of the semantics of it. When is pro this considered anti that? And I think we're going to see it in a lot of the Islamic related cases, especially any case where somebody could be labeled pro-Islamic if you are advancing your faith, pro-Christian because you're advancing your faith. Is that going to be considered anti something else? You're not really anti anything. You're just pro your thing. Right. And that's part of the vagueness of it. And I think that's part of the things that everybody's going to have to fear because there's just no way to know. And ultimately, I think that's why eventually I hope that the Supreme Court weighs in and says, no, you have to have some sort of standards, or it can't just be this vague anti-American. But how many people get deported in the meantime? That's right. You go back to one of the things that we don't see much of them anymore, but the 212C cases for the people with the criminal convictions. How many people got deported between April of '96 and in May of 2001
Oh,
under what was then ruled an unconstitutional law. And I mean, it was a lot. Yeah.
it was a lot.
So,
I worked for the government then. It was a lot.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as an immigration attorney back then, it was just walking people into court and like, Judge, we object. All right. Nice of you to object. Here's your deportation order. It wasn't anything you could do except just keep trying to. And then clients were faced with a situation of mandatory detention
Right.
or for who knows how long. And that's what we're seeing now with these revocations and terminations and picking people up at their I-130 interview.
Yeah.
They're going straight into custody. And that's forcing people to make that decision. Do I want to fight this, or do I just want to try to get out of here?
And do you have a choice though? If you have children with that American citizen, you're going to definitely take a lot of their resources away that really would be better used being put into the economy or sustaining that family.
And they've made the threat now too, and I think they've only had to do a couple of examples to make it a valid threat. Do you want to control where you go? If I voluntarily leave and I'm going to go back to a country where maybe I am going to be threatened or maybe face persecution, or am I going to go to someplace where they may send me that I've never even heard of before and know nobody, don't speak the language, and who knows what my future there is. Sometimes having control over your destiny is, yeah, something that you want to take. So yeah, it's very, very scary. And then on top of it all is all the, they fired how many judges and all the delays. So, the recent postings where they were making dedicated dockets in all the courts now.
Dedicated detained dockets or dedicated?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because they want to detain. I think we talked about this last time, maybe the time before, but they want to detain everyone. Which, again, it's a deterrent for people to go to court then, and it really puts everybody in a conundrum because you want to have your case heard and you want justice to be bestowed upon your client, at least have due process. And every BIA case that has come out since this administration has been in office has been against the aliens and against the non-citizens. They've been extremely harsh, basically saying asylum is shut down in the United States. Hardship is shut down in the United States for cancellation or removal. And it's sending a powerful message. It's like they're not allowing published decisions that are positive to come out.
Yeah. And I haven't, I've talked to some people and I think clearly judges are getting some direction as to what are appropriate decisions and what are not. I haven't talked to anybody at the BIA level that has indicated that they're getting any kind of that kind of pressure, but you have to assume that they are.
Well, they are. Let me explain to you something. Cersei Owens, and I know people are mispronouncing it as Siren Owens, and that's fine. They can call her Siren. I worked with her in the Atlanta district, and we'll have another segment more on Cersei, but she's in charge of the board right now too. So she's actually one of the board members. She's, I think, the acting chair of the board, and she's in charge of all of EOIR. So she's in charge of the BIA, and she's in charge of the courts. And she is definitely pro-enforcement. I'm trying to think of the words. I hesitate to say anti-immigrant because I don't know, but she's definitely does not have empathy that I've seen working with her.
Yeah.
That's my personal experience. And so I think she's behind these decisions, these board decisions which one she's allowing to be published. And she's probably, since they also fired a whole bunch of board members, the board members that she retained, she's probably told them, you need to rule a certain way, or, I'm going to say something to get rid of you, like under the way President Trump is using Article 2.
Yeah.
So I actually recently filed a mandamus against her in Boston, and I'm going to be very interested in how this turns out, because it is a motion to terminate based on this individual being a lawful permanent resident on a conditional basis, and they're not acting on it. And technically, it's a mandatory termination per the regulations. So once it's terminated, this client is eligible for naturalization, has been, but they're not acting on things that they need to act on. So a mandamus was necessary.
Yeah, and we're seeing those delays in everything, and I don't, with the number of people that are detained, and then the number of people that are being put into proceedings, I I don't know how the courts are going to keep up. I mean, I did recently hearing some things that the maybe rules about having cases finished within 60 days of the notice to appear in detained cases. I don't know that I don't know how that's feasible with the few number of judges we have and 55,000 plus people detained. That's, I don't know how many judges are left, but that's more than 1,000 per judge.
Not only that, if they have an attorney, right, and they do litigate it properly, that's a violation of due process. There's no way that you or I could do, the job that we need to do to get the case prepared, and the witnesses and any expert witnesses, and have the time in court that we need, because detained cases do move so fast that they're not going to have the time on the docket to give us. They're going to rush it, denying due process. Even if the board basically blankets, just says, nope, no due process, it's going to go to the circuit court and they're going to disagree, And so if they have a good attorney, it's going to be turned back around.
But going back to your earlier point, is who can afford it? And we were talking earlier about fees. Like, I have an appeal coming up that I'm getting ready to file, and the appeal fee went from $110 to file your notice of appeal to now $1,010 to file the notice of appeal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a question. Where does that money go?
I believe all of it goes into the operation of EOIR, and like your filing fees for regular applications and petitions and things go into the operation supposedly of USCIS or ICE and its related bodies.
It'd be interesting to FOIA how much money and where it goes after that, because with the USCIS fees, we know those fees, USCIS is pretty much self-funding. So those fees are supposed to be paying the salaries of the USCIS officers. But the EOIR fees, they've been nominal for a reason, because their salaries are paid for by taxpayers. So it'd be interesting to see if this just ends up being a bonus given to the judges that deny the most cases.
That would be interesting if they put some bonuses for denial rates in there.
They might not say it like that. Say the greatest immigration attorney or immigration.
Yeah, but in the detained docket cases, the denial rates have been historically fairly high. Because there is a lot of people caught at the border, a lot of people that are pro se, a lot of people that are raising purely economic claims, not
sure
things that would qualify for asylum. So the border judges and detained docket judges always have very high denial rates, but now that we have so much internal detention, and some of those judges are not used to that kind of high denial rate.
Right. And they're used to having basically um, what do we call it when a judge can actually rule based on the law and has their own discretion?
Yeah,
Was
just the discretion of the judges to act.
Yeah, and
I
now they're
don't think that
basically
exists.
being pressured, so they're losing their
Au-
independence.
Autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not used to that.
Mm.
And
No.
I mean, there are cases that you're right; they don't rise to the level of the asylum laws and past persecution, or you know, uh, well-founded fear of future persecution. But everyone has to have. I've always felt this, no matter what, is that because I've been surprised with some cases that start out a certain way, and once you start getting into the weeds and the person starts opening up, it's actually an excellent case. They just
Yeah.
You've got to hear their story.
Yeah.
So everyone
Well,
should have
and
to be in court and have full due process.
one of the things that during my time on the bench, one of the things that I mean, I knew it intrinsically, but I didn't realize the significance of the impact of it. Is all the asylum like if you're detained, all the applications are in English.
Right.
Your duty as a pro se respondent in immigration court is to fill out that application and provide it to the court within time limits that the judge has set. And if you don't speak English and you're detained and you don't have money or access to attorneys, what do you do? I mean, certainly when you come to court, there's a translator there. Maybe the courts are so busy now. I've seen a couple where even Spanish language translators they were having trouble getting. But um, how are you going to complete that? How with the fast turnaround time? I mean, I've seen people in court that have spent days and weeks detained, with a English to Spanish dictionary and trying to get other inmates to help them to fill out that application.
That's not good
And
either.
yeah, and in 60 days now, these people are going to have to try to fill that out not only for themselves but maybe their entire family. I don't. It's going to be very very difficult.
That's going to be very difficult. And without a certified translation, I mean, the case can be overturned too, again, if they stick the course out. But
Yeah, yeah, and you try now within. It's been in place for a long time now, but with real ID requirements with respect to documents and corroboration, and the judges are being much more strict about what is corroboration. And if you're detained and if you're unrepresented, even if you're represented, being able to obtain that corroboration from overseas in very narrow time windows is very very difficult. There's some countries that you try all you want, but you're just not going to get any documents.
yeah, that's true. I mean, I just had a client that actually, she has her passport. She's Canadian, and but she was born in India. And they're asking now with the 485s, they want the long form birth certificate. Well, she didn't have her birth certificate, and she had to pay $1,500 to get her birth certificate from India. And I told her, you're just going to have to do it because they are requiring it. We would have to say in an affidavit, maybe even from your government, because it's hard to interpret the words that they're saying, USCIS, why it's not available. And, that can delay your case. If it's available, we need to get it. And this
Yeah,
is like
and
having a passport. So I think this is part of the whole the Real ID Act and having
mhm.
every single document to confirm who you are. Am I right?
Yeah, and then there's the presumption of if you had a document that just got created. Well, you were born 30 years ago. Why is this just created now? There's that inherent presumption that many of the courts and many judges will apply that it's not valid. This isn't any good.
Well, that's
Anybody can get this document made.
if
So
I go to get my birth certificate issued now, another copy of it, it's still valid from Virginia. I mean, I would that it's just
you
another
hope.
copy.
You hope.
Well, go ahead and send it to the forensic document laboratory. I would love you
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. No,
I
but
even have mine.
it's
I even got an apostle on mine because I had to send mine overseas.
the
Um,
it's yeah, all part of the plan of chaos. I'm convinced that it's just um, that's the plan. Create chaos and confusion. Just get as many people to leave voluntarily as you can, and and call it a win. I
yeah, we
I
just have
think
to
that's
hope
it.
that the USCIS offices too that we go into just continue to operate in accordance with the law, and just not play into this chaos.
You'd think that, but then you watch USCIS's social media feeds, and they're always on there bragging about who got arrested and who they turned in. So
Yeah, I don't like that.
no, it's a little uncomfortable. So
So they
yeah.
actually modeled themselves. Well, I could be wrong about this, but when we separated, right? I should say maybe Cayman Islands. I have a friend who was in charge of Cayman Islands immigration. He's now like the deputy prime minister of the Cayman Islands. He worked his way up. He was an
Mm-hmm.
immigration officer there. And so when they separated their immigration, their enforcement, they wanted the benefits section to be benefits and separate it from enforcement. And when DHS was created, they did separate the benefits from the
Mm-hmm.
enforcement because we were together before. We were
Right.
Immigration and Naturalization Service, examinations, some places called USCIS, and there was the litigation unit that was the trial attorneys, the district assistant district counsel,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had, deportation that was all part of the same agency of Immigration and Naturalization Service. Separated. USCIS is supposed to be the benefits section. They're not supposed to be the harassment section and looking like they're enforcement. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Their social media pages are very scary. They have a right to deny benefits to people who don't qualify in accordance with the law, of course, but they shouldn't be frightening people to come forward trying to seek benefits they do deserve, or they believe that they should be accorded in accordance with the law. That's just my opinion.
And relishing
Mm.
in their enforced detention and denials and just like feeling about how great that
And
is.
I just found out the person who took over for USCIS, because when I went to do this mandamus, is no longer Kika Scott. It
No.
is now an individual, a male individual. I'm forgetting his name, but he took over July 25th, 2025. And I think it's since he came in, they've had this new campaign of terror, if you ask me.
Self-promotion. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Susan, it's been 30 minutes again. So pleasure seeing you as always.
Pleasure seeing you, and I hope you have a great week.
Yeah, you as well. And we'll see you next week.
You bet. Take care.
All right. We'll see you.
Bye.